Hi guys! So I am back, and from my vacation in Massachusetts we had a blast. If you saw the last video, this is part 2. And I just want to explain part 2 because it kind of jumps right into it. I kind of took weird different videos throughout the whole vacation. But this one is actually the ghost walk that Don and I went on. A tour guide. She was a really awesome lady. Really was, funny at parts, and she was just awesome, amazing. But she took us through the town of Salem and kind of explained the different buildings, and it was a ghost walk. So she said, okay, well this one was haunted by this. This is why this was haunted, and actually really cool. Which, if you've ever seen the movie Hocus Pocus, which I think in the first part, we go to a building and she talks about the movie Hocus Pocus. A lot of that was filmed in Salem, so a lot of the buildings we went to, she's like, this is, where this scene is from. So it's really cool to go walk around there. Next time I go to watch Hocus Pocus, I'm going to be like, I was there! Anyways, so I didn't do a lot of videotaping because a lot of the stuff, obviously, it being Salem, a lot of the things going on at night, it was dark, and I don't think I have one of those cool little settings where everything turns green. But I just wanted to explain to you what this part was, and it'll be cool because it's going to be kind of like you're walking through the ghost tour with me. Woo! And if you see anything, I haven't watched all the video clips over again, but if you see anything weird, let me know, because sometimes, spirits and ghosts and stuff like that, they show up, in the video. So if you see anything, let me know in the comments down below, okay? Because maybe it is something. Maybe it is a spirit. I have no idea. So I hope y'all enjoy it. The show, my friends.
I don't know why, but every single one of these bricks was imported from England. For some reason, they like their bricks better than the ones here, but that was one of the reasons why it cost so much. Derby kids eventually sold the building, but when they sold it, it was kind of under a few conditions because they sold it for a real bargain. And they pretty much said to the city, you know what, you can have this building for X amount of dollars, but it can never be used for like a residential, building. It can never be sold for condos or apartments, which is fantastic because so many of these historic buildings are. It can never be used for, financial gain. Never be like a hotel or something like that. So, and it had to be kind of kept with the name Derby, which is why this is Derby Square. Currently, if you guys have done the show Cry Innocent or have seen some of the art shows that are going on in town right now, they're usually held on the bottom floor. So you can kind of go in, peruse it, etc., etc. The top floor is normally vacant. If you have, oodles and oodles of cash, you can have your wedding reception up there, or, high school reunion, whatever the case may be. Anyone see the film Hocus Pocus? It's on TV like 17 times a day now. Absolutely. This was actually the building that they had the ball in at the end. I put a spell on you. This was actually that happened in this building. Nothing necessarily evil or incredibly spooky goes on here as far as hauntings, but it is haunted by what we call a poltergeist. I'm sure there are some of us that are old enough to remember, the 80s Spielberg movie. Not that I'm that old. But poltergeists actually aren't really evil spirits like that movie kind of made them out to be. They're more a little bit on the mischievous side, and they really like to cause trouble kind of at our expense. I always liken them to like an 11-year-old boy. Not necessarily evil, but like pretty darn close. There's an elevator in this building that goes up and down whenever it pleases. It has been known to, unfortunately, slam on fingers and toes every now and then. It hasn't actually taken any fingers or toes off yet. Operative word. There are things that kind of go missing in here. Things get moved around, tables, chairs, etc., etc. Typical poltergeist activity. Again, not necessarily like, oh my god, my life is in danger. More like, oh my god, this is really incredibly annoying and I wish it would stop. Dumpster, for some reason, there's usually someone behind it that thinks it's funny to jump up at the tour. Lost a lot of people on my tour that way. Anyway, so we are eventually, after I'm done talking about this building, just FYI, going to be going down Essex Street to the left and crossing the street. I'm telling you that because when Essex Street gets really crowded, I just don't want to lose anyone. And then there's a very interesting part of this building that you can kind of see around the corner that I'll give you guys time to look at. But to talk with all that crowd, I don't think there's any way you'd be able to hear me. So we'll start here and sort of meander our way down. So this lovely, gorgeous brick building used to be the first church of Salem. So in 1692, when these poor victims of the witch trials were brought to church, they were brought to this particular location. To confuse things, this brick structure is actually the first Church of Salem building to be on this spot. The first, why I knew you would never hear me. The first Church of Salem building. This gets confusing the more you do it, let me tell you. The first Church of Salem building, which obviously would have been made out of wood in 1692, was a little bit closer here, and you'll see, I don't know if you guys have been past Rockefeller's restaurant, this is actually what we're behind. This is a huge building, so when we go around it, you'll kind of see some of the differences in the architecture. But imagine the first church, when it was made of wood, was a little bit closer to, you know, where we are right now. And when you go around the corner, we'll see the sign that actually says First Church, 1629. Anyway, long story short. When these poor victims of the witch trials were accused of being a witch, they were brought to the church to be excommunicated, which pretty much means is that these people said, you know what, you're in league with the devil, you've signed the devil's book, you're no longer in God's good graces, you're not going to be allowed into heaven. Oh, and FYI, you're not going to be allowed to be buried in hallowed ground. Keep that in mind because a lot of people ask me where the witches are buried or where the victims of the witch trials were buried. They weren't. Because you were excommunicated from the church. They weren't going to allow you to be buried in hallowed ground with everyone else, unfortunately. Anyone recognize the name Bridget Bishop? Anyone been in town long enough to? Excellent. Bridget Bishop, unfortunately, was one of the victims of the witch trials. She was a very strong-willed, very independent, very intelligent, very outspoken woman, which was not something they liked in 1692. I've actually had guys on my tour say, we don't like that now. I'm like, his wife's like, we'll talk about that later. I'm like, okay, he's going to be a ghost on my next door. Not good. And she also had red hair. Kind of not good in her favor. Everyone wants to know why that would be, why these people hated the redheads. Mind you, these people haven't been here from England that long. They still hate the Irish. It literally was that simple. I wish I could make this elaborate story about why they didn't like redheads, but sometimes the truth is actually that simple. Anyway, poor Bridget was actually seen one day not going into church. So everyone else in town is going into church and they're passing her pretty much right outside the building. Just pouring water into her bucket, not going into church. A beam, just a piece of wood, fell from the ceiling of the church. And suddenly everyone got it into their heads that it was Bridget's fault. That she was in league with the devil, that she caused this beam to fall down on top of everyone, and oh my God, she must be a witch. They actually were able to legally use this story in court as evidence to hang this woman. They used to call this spectral evidence. And it was totally allowed. You could literally be walking down the street and say, I mean, you could literally be walking down the street and pass your neighbor, and your neighbor say, oh my goodness, what a lovely day. And you can say, oh my goodness, yes it is, but doesn't it look like it's going to rain? And if it rained later on, that was a premonition, you're a witch. And again, they could use that. That was completely allowed. So unfortunately, Bridget was hanged for something that actually happened in this building. All set?
Yeah.
Actually going to be crossing the street. I will obviously try to do my best to wait for everyone so no one gets stuck behind, all right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy. So I know I should have worn my kilt.
Okay. Alright, off we go, guys.
The light.
Yeah. Army barracks right in front of us.
Hey Mo, how do you enjoy your tour so far?
Sexy land.
Sexy land? Interesting. The witch house. Dun, dun, dun.
I was just remarking on how cool I thought your hat was. Especially when you were along here. So I want you guys to get a nice visual of this gorgeous home. This is actually called the Witch House. Not going to stop here for two reasons. I mean, I'm going to talk about it. We'll just talk about it a little bit over there. One, they're usually given tours this time of night, and two, it gets incredibly noisy on this intersection, and I just don't want anyone to get run over or hurt, and heaven forbid, I want you guys to be able to actually hear the tour. So, take some photos, etc., and we're going to go that away. Okay?
Smile. Is she part of the egg or what?
I want to get closer so I can hear.
Ah, there we go. You guys can scoot this away a little bit. For some reason the sidewalk gets wider and wider and wider and then narrower and narrower, but this is a nice wide space. Okay. So yes, as this lovely gentleman pointed out, look, another First Church. This is the current First Church of Salem. And this is confuse ourselves even more. So this is what, the 5th building, the First Church of Salem. This is actually not that old of a building, believe it or not. They just created it to look like it was very old. But anyway, getting back to that lovely, lovely home that we were just at, that is actually known as the Witch House. Now, who decided to name it that back in the 1940s probably didn't realize that we were going to have what we have in Salem now, where we have, you know, the Witch House, the Witch Dungeon, the Witch Museum, the Witch History Museum, everything begins with the word witch. But they were like, oh, it kind of had something to do with the witch trials, which was called the Witch House. Yeah, it kind of sort of had something to do with the trials, kind of indirectly. It was actually owned by a gentleman named Jonathan